An Honorable Profession is brought to you by Tech for America, an organization dedicated to providing a platform to solve America's toughest public challenges. For more information, visit T4A.org. That's T, the number 4, A.org. Welcome to An Honorable Profession, a podcast giving America hope since 2018. I'm your host, Ryan Coonerty. An Honorable Profession is a New Deal podcast, an organization dedicated to supporting innovative policymakers and ideas to solve our most challenging problems. Check out newdealleaders.org/ideas for policies that you can bring to your community. Please tell your friends about An Honorable Profession and rate us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Today, our guest is St. Louis Treasurer Tishaura Jones. Tishaura will tell us how she uses her position to reduce parking tickets and increase college attendance. She'll also tell us what it's like to raise a child in the ultimate child care center, the state legislature. Tishaura, like all our guests, is a New Deal leader. She's also a lot of fun to talk to. I hope you enjoy our conversation. Tishaura, welcome to An Honorable Profession. Why don't we start with what leads a finance major into politics?
Well, thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here. And I was raised in politics. My father was termed out as the comptroller of the city of St. Louis. Before that, he was an alderman. He ran for sheriff. He ran for committeeman, a whole host of things. He was city assessor. So politics is in my blood and my DNA. However, I didn't want to be a politician. I just kind of
that was your act of rebellion.
Right, that was my act of rebellion as a young adult, and avoided it most of my adult life, and got bit by the bug when I was asked to fill an unexpired term as a district committee woman in my ward, and met a lot of great people, saw politics as a way to really help people who need help, and here I am.
So were you out walking precincts as a child and doing all that?
Stuffing envelopes when we still had to do that.
Yeah.
Licking stamps before they were self-adhesive. I was, helping out in campaigns since I was 3 years old. So that's my earliest memory of being on a campaign.
Wow. Now, you went to work in the state legislature. So tell me about your first run for office and what that was like, and was it any different than you thought it would be? Having grown up with it, you should have a pretty good idea, but was it different?
Oh, absolutely, because my first run for state rep was as a new mom. My son was 3 months old, and I'm a single mom, so he was 3 months old when I kicked off my campaign. And
how did you do that? How is that possible?
By the grace of God. I actually had decided not to run once I got pregnant. It was unexpected, and I had a couple of friends who actually were male convinced me that it was still an option that I could pursue. They kind of laid out a timeline for me and said, "Oh, well, this is perfect. You'll have the baby in September 2007, and filing isn't until February of 2008. You can do this. You can take a few months off and then get back on the trail in February." And that's exactly what I did with my family behind me. Helping to babysit, but I would literally, when I was knocking doors, when I was running for state rep, I would go pick up my son from daycare, put him in his stroller, strap him in, give him a snack, and we would go knock doors. But, also what I learned is that babies get you votes. Mm-hmm. But also people respect that, whatever station you're in, that you take the time to knock on their door and to talk to them about why you're running and the importance of running. So
now, is your son interested in politics, or is he rebelling like you did?
You know what? I think he is embracing his lineage.
Okay.
He told me the other day that the two things he wants to do when he grows up, he says, "Mom, I want to be an NBA player, and then I'm going to run for president."
All right. Well, good. Let's hope that happens sometime soon. So you went to work in the state legislature and with a young child. Talk about some of those experiences. Was it different than what you expected? Was it similar? challenging was it to move legislation that mattered to you?
So I also went into the House in the minority. So there were about 74 Democrats to about 85 or so Republicans. So it wasn't a super minority. But my second term, it was a super minority. We only had about 50 or so Democrats, and at the time, I was also elected as a system minority floor leader. So, but I found that if you concentrate on the things that you agree on, you can still get some things done. And I got more things done when we were in the super minority than when we were just in a slight minority.
Interesting.
Yeah, because it's all about relationships, and unfortunately, the people see all of this hyperpartisanship going on social media, but they don't see what happens in the back rooms. They don't see what happens in the offices, and that's when people have the time to build relationships. I tell everybody the story about how I would go and sit with my committee chairs and just ask them questions about the committee. I wouldn't ask a lot of questions in committee, but I would wait till after committee to ask, hey, what's this mean, and how does this relate to X, Y, and Z? And they appreciated that because that gave them a chance to also mentor new legislators regardless of their party. And one of my committee chairs, I'm still friends with to this day. His name is Kevin Wilson. He represented Neosho, Missouri, and he was the committee chair of health policy. And normally what happens when a committee chair is terming out, they will let the vice chair be over the committee, for a session or so. And he let me actually chair the committee, which is, totally unheard of in a hyper-partisan environment. But we still keep in touch. I actually hired him when I was treasurer because he has a consulting firm doing HR. So I knew that he would be objective when it came to, looking at my office and how we were doing things. He's a mentor of mine to this day.
Wow. So, this is sort of breaking news because you have Missouri, which is a swing state.
I think Missouri is deep red now.
Deep red, good enough. All right,
Yeah.
But it's all rough and tumble politics. But you were able to build bridges across not only a partisan divide, but you have urban-rural divides,
Right.
you have suburban divides,
Right.
And so you were able to build bridges in the legislature.
Right. I sought out relationships with people who were in districts that were totally unlike mine because I didn't know what the rural struggles were. So I wanted to learn. And as a result, I still have friends on both sides, on the rural side, who are still friends to this day when I go back to Jeff City to visit.
And what were some of your priorities when you were in the legislature that you were able to move forward?
So education was a huge priority. We have charter schools in Missouri, and at the time they were only allowed in St. Louis and Kansas City. And also they didn't have a lot of accountability. We had charter schools that were absolutely failing our students. Schools where only 5% of the students were testing proficient on our standardized tests. And so I co-sponsored a bill to bring up the standards for charter schools, but also to provide a clear pathway out to be able to close charter schools when they're not performing. And even though at the end my name wasn't anywhere on the bill, everybody knows that was my bill. And that's, it's a thing about ego too. I didn't care if my name was on the bill or not. Everybody knew it was my bill. It was something that I was passionate about as a young mother. And also, it mattered to me most that the work got done and it made it across the finish line than my name being on something.
And how did you balance the demands of a legislative session with being a young mom?
I had a lot of help, and the legislature, at least in my class, the class of 2008, they helped raise my son. They called him the house baby, and they're amazed at how big he is now. And nights where we would run late, I would bring him to the floor. Then that was allowed. And they would just pass him around or take him to their office and let him play because the Republicans had offices in a closer proximity to the floor than Democrats. And I had staff who just totally adopted my son. My staff person, legislative assistant and her husband, my son now considers them his white godparents, or grandparents, actually. He calls them Nana, Janet, and Teepaw. I expanded my village.
So yeah, you can build a family in politics.
You
as
can.
well.
You can.
So after serving 2 terms in the legislature, you moved to county treasurer or city treasurer,
Right.
Which is moving from a legislative branch to more of an executive position. Can you
Right.
talk about that transition and what you see as the differences are for those who sort of don't follow these sorts of differences in government? They're very different positions and very different approaches.
Very different. And then also moving from state to local was a huge shift. So the city treasurer in St. Louis is probably the most unique elected official in the country, because not only do I have normal treasurer duties like investment and cash management and process payroll, I'm also the city's parking supervisor.
That's all. In local government, parking is always the number one issue, no matter where you are in the country.
And it's the number one thing that pisses people off. Our parking division has over 7,700 meters, 6 garages and 2 surface lots. It also is the parking tickets and parking policy, which is a little unique. But I decided to use my power for good and not evil, and that we did the necessary upgrades to bring that department from from the 19th century to the 21st century. We were collecting only coins. We didn't have smart meters. You couldn't pay with a credit card or app. Now you can do all of those things. And also we take a portion of our residual revenue and we invest it in the community. So we invested in financial empowerment initiatives, such as helping people restore their credit or improve their credit. We do a whole host of financial empowerment classes in the community, and our largest program is the College Kids Children's Savings Account program, which provides a $50 college savings account to every kindergartner entering a public school. We're in our 4th year, and we have over 13,000 children saving for college in the city of St. Louis.
Now that's amazing, and we're just about to launch a college savings account based in part on your model in my county. But for the folks listening out there, $50 doesn't seem like much with the cost of college.
Right.
But tell people about why you do it and what the impacts that all the studies have shown.
Right, you're right.
accounts.
$50 isn't a lot of money, but studies have shown it's not the size of the account, but the presence of the account that matters. And studies at Washington University in St. Louis have shown that children with less than $500 saved are 3 times more likely to go to college and 4 times more likely to complete college than children without savings. And imagine what would happen to this generation that's in school now if they are taught from a young age to save for college, to save for things that they want to buy, to delay gratification, and then also those lessons translate into families and how they handle their finances as well. So we use this as a 2-generation strategy, not only to give children something to aspire to, but also to help change families' economic behaviors and help their economic mobility.
Yeah, that combination of aspiring and expectation, and then the knowledge you gain about the power of savings, it's amazing that a small amount of money can have such a profound impact on not just the child, but the family.
Absolutely. It's the most rewarding program I've ever started.
Yeah. Now, I assume you get to meet with the kids and talk to them?
Yes, absolutely. We have family savings nights at the credit union, which holds the accounts. We use the credit union instead of the 529 program because we wanted people to have an option on how they deposit money into the accounts. And currently, you can't deposit cash into 529s, but you can with a local credit union. And on our family savings nights, they're beautiful. The families from all sorts of backgrounds, means, races come in to deposit money for their kids' accounts. We feed them pizza, we get them all hyped up, and then we send them home. Kindergartners still let you pick them up and hug them, unlike my 11-year-old son who sometimes doesn't even want to be around me. And then, we find that, it's something that brings the community together. And what we're trying to do is make this a part of the fabric of our community, a fabric of the city.
And you've been a real leader and showing so many other places the way. So you're not only impacting lives in St. Louis, you're impacting lives across the country.
Yes, absolutely. Any city that calls us to ask us how we did it, interested, we give them all of the information we have, our MOUs with the schools, our MOUs with the banks, so we try to let them just, adapt the program to their environment and let it roll.
And so you've been at the state level, you've been at the local level. What's next for you? What are you thinking? You made a run for mayor last year.
Yes.
We are all very excited and supported you. What do you think? What do you think is next? Is it politics? Is it out of politics?
Well, I'm really passionate about financial empowerment and the promise that it has for not only St. Louis, but our country, and how a lot of our marginalized population just did not get what we call the memo on how to handle their finances. And then also how financial empowerment can, it's about empowerment in general, not just financially, but empowerment in sort of your government, and empowerment to your vote, empowering your people to recognize what local government does. So, I see myself staying in this space for a while. I am reconsidering another run for mayor since I came so close. That number 888 is going to haunt me for life. And also just making sure that I build more partnerships around the country. There's a lot of great work going on in a lot of great cities that we see here at New Deal every year when we come to this convening. And, just looking at other ideas and bringing them to St. Louis, tweaking them for our environment and letting them roll.
How do you stay positive about politics? As you mentioned, right, like there's big structural problems in our country. You're in a red state. Mm-hmm. We're watching amazing division and gridlock at the national level. So for all the listeners out there who are like, I like what Tishaura's doing, but politics doesn't seem, it just seems like it's too hard or too mean. What do you tell people who are thinking that way?
Don't be so helpless. The resistance is at the local level. And as we've seen in a lot of urban cities around the country, you see mayors fighting back against the administration and finding the resources locally to help their people thrive, and invest locally. Just let the federal government do what it's going to do, but you can control what happens with yourself, with your neighbors. We need to get away from this sort of rugged individualism mentality that the U.S. has had for years. It's unfair to think that someone can pull themselves up by their bootstraps when they don't have boots. So we have to make sure that we are controlling our environment locally, and let the federal government do what it's going to do. Okay,
so everyone at home, you heard it. You can't give up. You got to get involved, and particularly at the local level is where...
Right. I always like to say that elections 9 miles away are more important than elections 900 miles away. All politics is local.
That is good advice. That is very good advice. Well, Tishaura Jones, thank you so much for joining us today. You truly make politics an honorable profession, and I hope that you're in a couple years from now we can be interviewing your son as he makes his run for office after his MBA career comes to an end.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to An Honorable Profession. Please subscribe to hear more amazing leaders. And keep asking your elected officials to be honorable. Boots Row Group produced this podcast. I'm Ryan Coonerty, and because we're keeping things honorable, no tax dollars were used in the making of this podcast.